everybody. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hi, Professor Dershowitz. It's so great to see you again.
Nice to see you, too.
Wonderful. So, let's get started. Professor, as you know, this week Israel is standing united with the United States in marking 9/11, the tragic day of the attack that changed how the world views international terror. So today we'll be devoting our program to counterterrorism with special guests from the annual 9/11 conference in Israel's Interdisciplinary Center led by Dr. Boaz Gano. Just like every week, we'll be joined by a special guest. Today we're honored to have Knesset member Dr. Anat Berko from the Likud party, who is both a terror expert and a member of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. Let's hear what she has to ask.
Shalom, Alan. Congratulations for your program at ILTV. I would like to tell you, as you know, I served in the army many years, and I conduct also after that in the academia a lot of research, first-hand research, face-to-face with terrorists to understand their mindset. And what I would like to ask you is a legal question now as a Knesset member, how we can prevent a citizen of US citizen, let's take for example, to join Daesh, ISIS, and after that come back and bring this very dangerous ideology of Salafiyah Jihadiyah to America or to other countries of the West. How we can take their citizenship if they don't have any other dual citizenship, for example. We need to prevent them from coming back and endanger our citizens. So please, Alan, I would like to get your answer. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berko. That's an excellent and important question. American law is quite clear that you cannot take citizenship away from a natural-born U.S. citizen. The Supreme Court of the United States held that citizenship is irretrievable and permanent, and so we have to think of other ways of dealing with the threat of terrorism. We can expand the criminal law to apply to such conduct, but the issue of taking away citizenship has been essentially removed from our arsenal by the United States Supreme Court. Other countries have different rules, but in the United States, citizenship is permanent.
Thanks for your response, Professor. Now, let's turn to Israel's annual 9/11 conference guests. Dennis Monet works with the STARCOM task force and was a deputy commissioner of the Nassau County Police in New York.
Hi, my name is Dennis Monet. I'm a research fellow here in Herzliya for the past 10 years. I'm also former assistant commissioner of police, Nassau County, Long Island, New York, 31 years in law enforcement. A line that I've been saying for the last 10 years here, I say it in New York, I say it in Israel, is that the Israelis get it when it comes to counterterrorism. And all nations need to get it to protect the citizens. The question I would pose is the dilemma of protecting citizens' rights and freedoms under a free democracy, yet the limitations that countries may have to impose when they challenge counterterrorism and the war on terrorism. The balance of the free rights of the citizens versus the protection that we need to impose sometimes to protect them from terrorist attacks. The question is, where do we draw the line? How do we make the balance? It's very difficult. Once again, the Israelis get it. They've become masters in balancing the two.
Dennis, first, thank you so much for your service to the United States and your service in the interest of defending people against terrorism and other threats. And of course, the question you ask is the most difficult one of all. I taught courses at Harvard Law School for 30 years about how to strike that appropriate balance. You'll recall that President Aharon Barak of the Israel Supreme Court famously said that Israel fights terrorism with one hand tied behind its back, but it has the upper hand because it follows the rule of law. And the rule of law requires compromises. It always requires compromises. And it would be easy to fight terrorism if we didn't have any rule of law. We could just arrest every suspect and keep them in jail for the rest of their lives. But we have to strike the appropriate balance. And that means that tragically, we will sometimes refuse to take actions that might prevent terrorism. How to strike that balance is very, very difficult. an independent judiciary is needed because it's the role of the executive to single-mindedly try to stop the terrorism. And it's the role of the civil liberties community single-mindedly to try to prevent the government from overreaching. And it's the role of the judiciary to strike the appropriate balance between the overzealousness of the government and the perhaps overzealousness of the civil liberties or defense community. This is not an easy line to draw. Every democracy does it differently. When Justice Brennan came to Israel, one of the great liberal justices in America, shortly before his death, he came back to America and he said, if terrorism were ever to come to our shores, this was before 9/11, there's only one country from which we could learn, the Americans could learn how to strike the appropriate balance. And he said that country was Israel.
Thank you, Professor. And now let's turn to a question from one of the young students attending the conference. William Stephen is from Cameroon in West Africa. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, my name is William Stephen. I'm a student in counterterrorism. I come from Cameroon. We are now in Cameroon fighting against Boko Haram in the north. In this regard, the Cameroon government decided to apply last year a law which allowed the death penalty for everyone who carried a terrorist attack or even are suspected to carry a terrorist attack. My question is, what do you think about regarding this law, also regarding the civil liberties and the human rights?
That's a great question. Certainly it would be immoral and illegal in any country to execute somebody who is, quote, suspected of planning terrorism. Suspicion is not enough. You go back to the Bible, it says, on the basis of 2 witnesses, may you convict somebody of a serious crime. Even if we believe 1 witness is enough, no civilized country, no country under the rule of law would ever convict anybody based on mere suspicion. But let's take a case where a person is clearly a terrorist, where he's been videotaped terrorism, engaged in an act of terrorism, or he's planted a bomb that killed hundreds of people. Is the death penalty immoral? I don't think the death penalty is immoral if, in fact, it can reduce the number of deaths from terrorism. I think that trade-offs are permissible. Even Jeremy Bentham, the great liberal philosopher, talked about the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And if you could show that the death penalty by killing 1 guilty person prevents the death of 10 innocent people, it would not be immoral. The experience in my country shows, however, that it can't be applied fairly. The death penalty is never applied fairly. It's applied largely to people of color, largely to minorities, largely to people who kill white people, not black people. It almost never gets applied to somebody who has a good lawyer, without being too self-referential. I have never lost a death penalty case. I've never had one of my clients executed, because decent lawyers can stop that from happening. And we shouldn't have a death penalty process that depends not on the seriousness of the crime, but on the color or background of the victim or perpetrator and on the quality of the lawyer he or she is able to get. So I'm against the death penalty, though I don't think it's immoral if you can demonstrate that by killing 1 guilty, you can save the lives of 10 innocent.
Interesting response, Professor. Now, let's turn to a question from Europe. Alistair Sutherland is the Assistant Commissioner for the London Police, and he wants to know how the international police community must adapt the ever-revolving threat of terror.
Hi, Professor. I'm Alistair Sutherland, Assistant Commissioner in the City of London Police. And this morning at the World ICT Conference, I gave a speech on how the City of London Police has evolved over the years to meet the new threats that are posed by international terrorism. And I used a quote from Charles Darwin to open my session, which you may recall. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And I used the example of how the police in the United Kingdom, in London, had combated Irish Republican terrorism for 30 to 40 years in the capital and have moved on now to combat the threat from international terrorism. But I just wonder if you have any ideas on how you think the international policing community needs to evolve to stay one step ahead of the new threat posed by terrorism. And I know you're in London next week. I think you've got a big speech to give in Parliament at the House of Lords. If you get any free time, please feel welcome. You'd be welcome to contact us and get in touch.
Alistair, thank you so much. Thank you for doing so much to protect the people of London and for coming to Israel to share your experiences. Look, terrorism is a phenomenon that only recently many European countries have taken seriously. The Germans didn't take it seriously when they freed those who had killed Israeli athletes in Munich. The French didn't take it seriously for many years until it came into their backyard. The British, of course, have led the way, tragically, because of terrorism from radical folks from Ireland. And I think they've done a very good job. And I think each country, Britain, the United States, and Israel, three major democracies that have taken terrorism very seriously, can learn from each other. Darwin is right. We need to adapt. The law can't be static. It must adapt to change to new situations. And the threat of terrorism can't be dealt with by 19th century legal rules. We need 21st century legal rules. We need to start thinking about 22nd century legal rules. We need to think about technologies that can be used to prevent terrorism. I know London has cameras on many, many street corners, which have had an impact on reducing crime. I think also in Great Britain, we don't have the easy availability of guns, particularly weapons that can kill many people at the same time. In the United States, we have easy availability of guns. So different countries have different approaches to the problem. And I think the most important thing is learning from each other. Thank you for protecting me when I come to London. I'm looking forward to my visit. I love London. I go there quite often.
Thanks, Professor. So it looks like our young audience is really enthusiastic today. Jennifer Namer from Miami, Florida, is another young student participating in the conference, and she's interested in your take on torture.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Namer, and I'm originally from Miami. I just finished my master's degree this week in counterterrorism and government, and I plan to attend law school afterwards. I know you are a strong advocate in protecting law enforcement officers from breaking the law while preventing terrorist acts, particularly in the ticking bomb scenario. You mentioned this in your book, Why Terrorism Works, which you wrote in 2002. You even suggest extreme measures for extreme situations that you call a torture warrant. Has your thinking changed at all since then?
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. You'll be a great law student then. I do think that I still oppose torture. I think it's wrong. I do think it's generally ineffective, though it sometimes works, and generally immoral, though in extreme situations one might make a case for its morality. But on balance, I do not support torture. But we might very well have a situation where a bomb is planted in a school, or a nuclear weapon, a dirty bomb is planted in a large city, and we have the person who planted it, and we want him to lead us to the bomb to save the lives of thousands of people. Every democracy in the world would engage in torture under those circumstances. And what I'm calling for is, if they would engage in torture, I want them to do it with accountability and visibility, not below the radar screen, because in a democracy, you need to know what your country is doing on your behalf. So I stand by my A, opposition to torture, but B, if torture is ever going to be used, you should require that it get a torture warrant from a high-ranking judge or justice of the Supreme Court.
Very interesting. All right, Professor, our final question comes all the way from South Central Asia. Raj Arora is a commandant for the border police in India, and he wants to talk about the connection between criminal behavior and terror.
Hello, Professor. Good morning. Myself, R.K. Arora, a border police officer from India. My problem is the drugs coming from Pakistan to India for funding of the terror organization. I want to ask whether we should prosecute these drug smugglers under criminal laws, or should we have a special law for these drug smugglers under counter-terrorism special provisions? How you can help us on this issue? Thank you.
Well, Commandant, thank you again for your service to your country in the efforts to prevent drug money from being used for terrorism. It's a widespread problem all over the world. Drug money is used to promote terrorism, and it has to be stopped. There are many possible approaches. Some countries have special anti-terrorism laws, anti-drug laws. My only contribution is this: whatever the laws are, they must be fair. They must strike the appropriate balance. They must require evidence that proves criminality beyond a reasonable doubt, that gives the defense an opportunity to challenge the evidence. Look, we say better 10 guilty go free than one innocent be wrongly confined. When it comes to terrorism, maybe we lower the number. Maybe it's only better 5 or 3 or 2. But on balance, we must keep our civil liberties, our due process safeguards. So whether you have a special rule relating to drug money, whether you have a special rule relating to terrorism, the rules must operate within the rule of law and must comply with basic concepts of fairness and due process. The law must be flexible and adaptive, but there are some common elements that must remain.
Thank you, Professor. That's all the time we have for today. Our hopes and prayers go out to the families of the victims of not only 9/11, but also to those who have suffered terrorism from all over the world. I also want to thank all of our guests, especially Dr. Anat Burko. If you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to iltv.tv or our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week. Thanks, Professor.
Thank you so much.